Hello and welcome to Cozy Alchemy, the podcast all about whimsical books. I'm your host, Elle, and I'm here with Sarah Burr, who is going to start us off with a game of two truths and a lie.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, and many thanks to Elle for inviting me to be a part of Cozy Alchemy. My two truths and a lie are I can understand Japanese, but I can't read or write in it. I wrote two books while I was in college. And lastly, for me, the first three chapters of a book are the hardest to write.
Ooh, those are good ones. Well, I have insider knowledge. Like, I know that you like manga, so the Japanese one is possible, I think. Two books while you're in college. Writing was definitely my hobby in college, so I could see how it could be done. But the first three chapters of a book being the hardest. Okay, I feel like all of these are plausible. I'm going to guess that... I'm going to guess number two is the lie.
Number two is actually it's the truth.
Aha.
The lie is I do not understand Japanese as much as I really, really wish that I did. I do watch a lot of anime. I read a lot of manga. I did sign up for Rosetta Stone with the hopes of learning Japanese, but that has fallen very much by the wayside this year. So maybe someday I will be able to both read, write, and understand it.
That would be amazing. My language on the side is Gaelic.
Ooh.
Because we took a trip to Scotland a couple years ago now. My husband had a conference there. And it's just so cool. Like, when you listen to it, it sounds very different and yet very melodical. But it's the same deal where, like, I have a podcast about, let's learn Gaelic on your coffee break. And I think I can say what my name is. That's about it.
Yes, I can. For a time when I was just starting out with the program, I could say, like, the man is eating his food and the boy is running to get water. And it's like very, very useful phrases.
Yeah. All right. Well, to get down to business, you have several series out in the world, and I'm sure we will get to talking about all of them, at least briefly. But I wanted to focus on your Glenmyre Whim mysteries to begin with. Because I feel like they have not only the wonderful cozy setting, but also a very fun twist of magic embedded in them. So can you talk to us a little bit about the series and about specifically the idea of whims?
Sure. The idea of whims actually came to me as I was reading a lot of paranormal cozy mysteries at the time. And I love reading about witches. I love reading about people who can see ghosts. And as I was reading more and more, I was like, what else could a sleuth do in that magical realm that maybe hasn't been necessarily done before? And I really love the concept of creating or taking something that we all associate, like, we all know the definition of whim, like on a whim.
Right.
We know that it's something that comes out of, I'm just going to do this because I feel like it. It's a little flight of fancy. But I love taking a word and just like redefining it. I feel like I've come across that a lot in, coming to mind is Philip Pullman's Golden Compass series, where they talk about demons.
Right.
And, when we think of demons, we think of these, mythical, terrible creatures. But in his world, even though he spelled them a little bit differently, they were these, like, part of your soul and these beautiful creatures that you went through life with. And I just love that concept. So when I started tinkering with the idea of creating my own paranormal cozy mystery, I was like, okay, like, what is the paranormal element going to be? And so we, after kind of taking a lot of time to brainstorm what different gifts could be, what different abilities. It got really hard to choose just one. And I asked myself the question, well, what if there was a bunch of different gifts that were working in this world, that there was this family, that everybody had their own unique ability that they could use to help the town, or to solve, not necessarily solve crimes per se, but to solve problems that were going on. And so that's how the Glenmyres came to be. And the Glenmyre family is this group of people who fled Massachusetts during a certain time period for seeking haven in upstate New York. And this family had the ability to really commune with nature and to use they could use magic. As the centuries passed, though, the family's gifts became less and less powerful. It used to be that they could do anything. They were, these magical beings. But over time, things kind of tapered off, whether it was like their bloodline grew to be too extended, or just like the connection to the world diminished. That we are now in the current timeline of Hazel. She is, her last name is actually Wickberry, even though she is a Glenmyre, and her aunt Poppy, who they believe that they are the last of the Glenmyre clan. And Poppy has the ability to see colors around a person and be able to interpret what those colors mean. So she could see someone's aura and be able to say like, oh, that person's really angry, or that person is really upset, or there's something weighing on this individual, or this person's lying.
And for an investigation.
Would be so nifty. And we can probably talk about why it's too helpful at times. And so that's Poppy's gift, and Poppy is Hazel's aunt, even though they are only 2 years apart in age. And Hazel's gift is really, really, really morbid. She has the ability to see a countdown clock over everyone's heads around her, counting down the time until they die. And I often think, and I often get asked by readers, why would you give her such a terrible power? And I ask myself the same questions, like, well, that's a good, why am I making her life so much harder than it needs to be? And I think the answer is I really don't know. She just seemed like she was capable of wielding this power and surviving this power in a way that she could use it to help those around her. She's still struggling with that at this point in time, but she also has a set of glasses that she wears that allows the countdown to be obscured when she has her glasses on, so she's not continually seeing all of these countdown doomsday type things going on. And
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to point out, you're not terrible to your character. You did give her.
I gave her yes. I gave her an out, and I also made it so that she can't see Poppy's clock as well. So the gifts don't work on other people in the family, although Poppy is the exception, because she can actually see Hazel's aura around her. So they all have these little quirks about how their powers are different, how their abilities kind of function with their own rules, and that all comes into play of how they can use that in the mysteries that they navigate.
Nice. Well, and speaking of navigating mysteries, this idea of being able to see somebody's countdown clock and essentially when they're, how far away their death is meant to be, plays into getting Hazel involved, right?
Yes, exactly. And that is because when you're writing a book one, you have to think of a logical way that a regular person, would insert themselves into a mystery that has appeared in their town. And I like to make things, I guess, a little bit difficult for myself in that I wanted it to be different than a cozy mystery reader was used to, where it's like, oh, my friend is on the hook for this crime and I feel this obligation to help them. I take it a little step further with Hazel, where she actually encounters the victim the day before they're killed. And she is able to see the life clock of this individual. I think it has he has 50 years left of his life. So she's like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, he's going to live a long, prosperous life. What wonderful, good for him. Because sometimes if she accidentally sees a life clock, if her glasses come askew, she has seen where it's like, oh my gosh, this person only has a couple of days, a couple of hours, minutes left to live. And so, she sees this life clock. It's still a jarring experience for her, but she's like, it's 50 years. That's as good as it can. That's as good as it gets, really, because he was like a 40-year-old individual. And so when the next morning she learns that the man passed away overnight, and people are talking that this is, he had a heart attack, it was a sudden, he was sick, there was something going on. She knows that there is a murder at play because her whim only has is infallible up until somebody purposefully tries to take a life. So things like, a car accident, a freak accident, a natural disaster, what have you. Her whim somehow accounts for all of that. But when human intention is involved, the act of taking someone's life, that's when her whim gets it wrong. So she knows right away, this isn't a heart attack. He didn't die from being sick. He was killed. And so she leaves a tip on the anonymous police line to be like, you need to look into his death because he was killed. And unfortunately for Hazel and one of her friends, that phone call then triggers the local law enforcement to start looking at a close friend of Hazel's. So Hazel then feels really guilty for sending the police after her, and that's kind of how the whole trope of my sleuth getting involved because she has to help a friend, how that then kicks off.
Yeah, which I think is great. The layers of motivation there is awesome. But I really just want to comment again on that, the fact that her whim has built in this sort of oversight or fallibility kind of. I think that's so clever and such a cool way to have limits on your magic system, right? Which can become a problem, especially when we're trying to investigate mysteries.
It was a huge problem. The wording for coming up with once I had the aha moment of, okay, it's when a human intentionally takes a life. That's when I was like, okay, that I can work with. But up until that moment, I was like, well, how am I going to account for her not being able to see murders, but any other type of death is free game? What's the difference here?
Yeah.
And it's actually a relative of Hazel's when she was younger, her great aunt Ruthie, who she grew up with, who also had the same gift or curse, depending on how you look at it, that Hazel had. And Ruthie had kind of gone beyond Crucible to explore the world, and she kind of figured out along the way of these people who I'm seeing their life clock then are showing up dead. How is this happening? So she kind of did the legwork for Hazel to figure out the ground rules ahead of time, so that when readers start the series, Hazel has a pretty clear definition of what her whim does and what it can't do at the same time.
Right. But we do get to see her grow in terms of making peace with the fact that she has it at all and being able to use it. Yeah. And I think that touches too on what you brought up, a gift versus a curse, right? And why should she be the one to, have what feels like a curse instead?
Yeah, and she also, because her aunt, who she's extremely close with, they always refer to each other as their best friend. Poppy has what she considers to be a gift because she can help people. She can see what's going on. She can lend a sympathetic ear when she needs to. And really, in the world of sleuthing, Poppy's the one that can do pretty much like the whole investigation herself if she needed to, because she could just go up to everybody in town and say, did you kill them? Did you kill them? And see like who reacts and whatnot. So it was interesting to kind of give Poppy this main character, I don't want to say main character energy, but give her like these traits of a main character, but then really we're seeing the story unfold through Hazel's eyes, and Hazel kind of has to take the reins of, you know, I'm the amateur sleuth here. I'm the one that's leading this story, and work on the investigation in her own way. And I can't tell you, Elle, how many times while I am writing that I will have a moment of, oh, Poppy can't be here because she will see the answer. And so it's always very deliberate of when Poppy is not in a scene, it's because she can't be there, because otherwise she kind of gives the jig up right away. But because my readers now know that, because my readers now know that, I now have to like take Poppy out of all of these other scenes, because I don't want them to be like, oh, well, Poppy was in that one scene where, oh, and that's the killer. So being able to work in other characters, have Hazel go off on her own, and what was always going to be like this dynamic duo of sleuthing is now kind of expanding more as, you know, we encounter more people in the town, which also include a long-lost member of the Glenmyre family who comes to town and really became my favorite character in the series. And that's that's our local detective, the local law enforcement, Holden Whitfield. He is the new guy in town. We learn eventually that he is related to the Glenmyres. He has a whim of his own, which I found to be very, very fascinating. I don't even remember how I came up with it. But he can, if he encounters a dead body, he can hear the last moments of that person's life, which makes it really helpful for being a detective, because you can go and he can hear like, oh, so-and-so was the one that killed me, or, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing here? Like, why are you waving that gun at me? And that's how he got to be such a good detective, and be able to be reassigned to the town of his choice. So that also presents some issues in itself of, well, I can't have him be able to like go look at a body and know who the killer is. So there's just a lot of hurdles that I've made for myself in creating this world. It takes a lot of effort to kind of puzzle out how each of these crimes is going to work. But it is a very, very fun puzzle.
Yeah, I imagine so. Well, and it helps that, it's not like the whole world is magical and you can like testify in court that like, my whim told me. It's like they still have to track down evidence. And,
exactly, yes. Yeah. That's a conversation. It's like, well, we can't go under in the court of public opinion. Yes, we might be able to get away with this, but not in real court. So them being able to then back up their suspicions or their findings through their whims with actual evidence becomes kind of like a secondary purpose of their investigation, because it's like we know the answer, now we have to prove it to the real world around us.
Nice. It feels very Poirot, especially because I'm thinking of Agatha Christie complaining about how, you have him in a scene and he sees the murderer right away, sort of like that sort of vibe to it. Which is funny because I know that of any golden age detective fiction, Nancy Drew is probably your biggest inspiration, right?
Yes, I love Nancy, and Nancy's inspiration really comes through, I think, in the friendships that I try to showcase in my writing. In the Glenmyre Whim mystery series is a little bit different from my other books like the book blogger mysteries or the trending topic mysteries, where I have a core group of friends, a crew or a squad that they're all sleuthing together. And but in the Glenmyre Whim mysteries, it really always started out with Hazel and Poppy being the team, and that was it. But then as I began exploring the world and meeting other people in the town, their friend circle began to grow. I mentioned Holden, who not only he kind of, I have this thing in my cozy mysteries where I love having a good relationship with local law enforcement rather than having it be testy or contentious. And because we learned that Holden is a member of their family, they have this like really wonderful bond, and he's kind of a little bit more lax with them, especially since they have this magical element to their lives that can help him out when he's in a bind. So there's Holden, and then there's Ezra, who is the bookstore owner, also a romantic interest for Hazel. And then we have a character named Constance Crane, who is she was so fun for me to write because personally, I love a cozy mystery that has an author in it. I don't know what it is. Even before I started writing cozies, my favorites were the books that featured a author in them. They didn't have to be the main character necessarily, but I just loved them being in the orbit. So Constance is really my like love letter to that aspect of cozy mysteries. And, she kind of came in, she was probably just going to hang around for one book, but she decided to stick around in Crucible, New York, and I really have a good time with her.
Well, and I have to say, it was even on my list specifically to mention. I feel like that's something you do really well, is the sort of ensemble cast of friends, right, who end up working together and are very supportive. And absolutely. And I feel like that's a great segue, too, into talking about some of your other series that do feature a really strong group. Do you want to give us like a quick rundown?
I would absolutely love to. So I mentioned the trending topic mysteries. This was actually my first modern cozy mystery series that that was published. They feature a social media influencer named Coco Klein, who has she was a part of a startup that got bought by Facebook, Meta, what have you, and so she was given a lot of money pretty early on in her life. And she's like, I can't stop working at the age of 25. What do I do? So she comes home to Central Shores, Delaware, which is a beautiful beach town that has a lot of tourism in the summer and is, your quintessential cozy mystery town by the sea. And she launches her own social media marketing firm. And through her experiences and her ability to kind of go online, dig through people's socials, unearth things that maybe people forgot that they posted or didn't think that other people. Yeah. I have such a great time writing that series because it feels like there's a lot of internet sleuths out there, and it feels like something that people could really do, where it's like, the victim was seen at this restaurant last night. Like, let's look at their social media. Oh, they posted a story with so-and-so. Like, what did they get up to afterwards? Oh, they posted from like a back alley at midnight and they're covered in blood. Like, what? So things like that. It was really fun to use technology in that way. And Coco is assisted by her boyfriend Hudson and her two best friends Jasper and Charlotte. And together, the four of them, by now, they start calling themselves the Sleuth Squad by the time they've solved their third mystery, and they've totally embraced it by. Yeah. I was like, oh man, I wish I'd called them this from the start, but it took them some time to get their groove going. Yeah. And so book 4 just came out. It's Throwback for Murder. And this one finds Coco. She is working very closely with the police department, helping manage their social media. And so that was a nice way for me to kind of tie in her having like an in at the police station that was sort of believable in a way that she could build those relationships so that she's not considered a thorn in their side. Right. And so at Coco's working for the police station, they're having this big festival in town, and one of Charlotte's ex-boyfriends appears, and he then dies at the festival. And of course, poor Charlotte is on the hook for his murder, so Coco has to step in, and the sleuth squad has to clear her name. And my other series that is set in modern times with a close group of friends are my book blogger mysteries. I just finished writing book 3 in the series. That's with my editor right now, so I'm really excited to get another installment out there for readers. This one, as you might have guessed from the title, features a book blogger who has 2 very close friends. The book blogger's name is Winnie Lark. Her friends are Owen Reed and Bex Vargas. And together they live in a small coastal Massachusetts town and solve crimes in all of their spare time. When Winnie isn't reading about mysteries, she's solving them herself. And
Perfect.
this one I did a lot of experimenting in the book blogger mysteries of trying to write like a true cozy mystery, one that wasn't like so like had such an emphasis on technology. Yes, Winnie uses it. She has her blog, all of that good stuff, but it's not like she's not digging through socials like Coco and her friends are doing. And there's also exactly, yes. And there's also this aspect of the celebrity appearance, because Winnie's twin brother is a like super, super famous movie star. And so when he comes to town, things get a little bit complicated. There's a lot of family dynamic stuff that I don't usually do in my writing. I like to keep relationships, I think, pretty non-confrontational in my books. I like to focus on the mystery as like the main point. So writing about family drama was really, really tough for me, because it was something that I wasn't used to writing and exploring those feelings that someone who's kind of lived in the shadow of their famous brother might be feeling in their family life.
Sure. And it's the sort of thing, that you would want to handle carefully in a cozy setting or a cozy book, so that it's not totally incongruous with everything else going on.
Yes.
But
you don't want it to like overshadow what's going on, but you have to like, you can't like brush it under the rug. And that's a hard thing a hard line to walk, because in Winnie's case, like, she's dealt with like years and years of feeling that like her family doesn't really care about her, because they're all these really successful people that are kind of self-absorbed in their own way. But Winnie also isn't good at communicating with them. So they've always felt that, like, she wants to keep us at a distance. So like, we'll respect her for that. And like, we don't want to like encroach and like drive her away further. And so it's this like tug and pull of, different views of relationships, and just how like a single miscommunication can really spiral into like years of trauma.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I really like that insight, and it's funny because of course the first thing I say is like, oh yeah, like it can be tough to address that in cozy, but I feel like one of the strengths of cozy genres is that you can address that sort of thing in a way that feels safe. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
you can have this misunderstanding that has, honestly, kind of a nice resolution. Like, not like the answer isn't everybody hates me. It's like, well, we just kind of misunderstood, but like, you're able to get to that point, I guess.
Yes. And I think that's one thing that people love about the cozy mystery genre, is that no matter what challenges we're going to face, we know we're guaranteed to have a happy ending. If it doesn't have a happy ending, or there's something, it's not really a cozy mystery. Like, part of the whole thing is we need to have like this satisfactory ending of, okay, maybe things didn't turn out exactly the way that we wanted it, but we're guaranteed that like justice will prevail, the good guys will win in the end. So I think that that setting or that vehicle for storytelling makes it a safe space to explore a lot of topics that maybe we don't normally come across in a mystery. One that I like to that I touch upon is the importance of taking care of your mental health. In the Glenmyre Whim mysteries, Hazel, she's dealing with this really heavy burden, and it's hard because she can't really talk about it a lot because they can't share their whims with the greater population. It's just like a family taboo of like, we keep these secret. But she still finds ways to have these outlets of, okay, like I need to decompress. That's how she got into her candle making in the first place. It was like a form of therapy for her that she eventually fell in love with and turned into a small business in her community. And like in my other books, like I'm always kind of circling back to the importance of taking care of your mental health, just because I find that that's something that we all benefit from. And if anything, I like to teach somebody reading my book something each time that they read. And if that's what they take away from it, then I've done my job.
I love it. That is a valuable lesson for sure. But we have missed one of your series, I believe.
We have, yes. And it's funny because it's hard to talk about all four together because this next series is so different. But I'm sure that we can find the thread of what brings them all together. And I think it's the aspect of found family. And so that series is the Court of Mystery series. And this was my very, very first attempt at writing a mystery and publishing a mystery. I had spent the two books that I actually mentioned at the beginning that I wrote while I was in college. Those were pure like young adult fantasy that I wrote. And I could just never like get them off the ground. I could never, fully get that world formed in my head. They're still sitting on my computer. I'm still one day going to attempt to revise them. But one day I just sat down and thought, what if I had this fantasy world where I had a duchess who solved crimes? I don't know why I asked myself that question. I had just finished playing the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt video game, and there was like a really great Duchess character in it, and I was like, ooh, I love the idea of a duchy, which is a kingdom that is ruled by a duke or duchess. And so I started playing with this question, and I started writing about this young woman who, like, her parents had recently died. She's ascended to the throne. She's feeling prepared for the role, but she's also kind of, she's obviously sad that her family has died.
Sure.
And she's leaning on her friends to kind of get her through this, but then she learns from her court physician that her parents didn't die in a carriage accident. They were actually poisoned, and the carriage then was crashed to make things look like that had been an accident. So she then realizes we have a traitor in the castle. She doesn't know who she can trust. And she really starts the series off alone. And it's funny to say that now because the series itself is 14 books long, and it completed in this past winter. The final book of the series came out, and Duchess Jacqueline went on such a journey, a like transformative journey through the entire series, where I can't believe that she started it feeling alone, because by the end she has this like wonderful group of people around her who would basically do anything for her, and she for them. And it was just really, it was so moving to write her like happily ever after scene, because it is like a cozy mystery in a sense. Yes, there are these fantasy elements, there is the suspense element, all of this good stuff, but at the end of the day, like good wins, and people can expect like a happily ever after. But she does deal with like quite a bit of loss along the way, and betrayal, and it was just creating my own world and just exploring it was really, really fun. I loved that I could make the rules, especially when it came to like poisoning people.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Where I would just like come up with like these random, herb names where it was like, oh, like the blood's leaf is, if you ingest it, like your tongue turns purple, and that's how you tell like that somebody's been killed with blood's leaf, or and things along that nature. Really made it fun that I could create these situations that worked for me a lot more easily than they do in the Glenmyre Whim series, where it's like, oh man, I've done this now. How do I get through it?
Right. I have to say, for me, I also find that writing in a fantasy world, and it takes away an element of like kind of like imposter syndrome-esque worry, where it's like, well, nobody can tell me I wrote about that poison wrong because I made it up.
I made it up, yes. And like I a lot of the times people ask like, oh, like, is this a historical cozy mystery? And I'm like, no, it is not, because there isn't running water, but they're able to like get hot water in a basin, and like making technology of the time, because I didn't want the main thing of the world is like, I didn't want there to be guns, because I don't like dealing with guns ever. And I didn't want like any fighting that had to be dealt with guns. Like I was all about like swords and fighting and whatnot. So trying to figure out yes, but also like I could make it into something of, well, there are oil lamps in the castle, or there was something, like the physician, or the court physician, he performs a postmortem or an autopsy. And like if you look at the history of like postmortems and autopsies, like those didn't come around until like, I'm pretty sure at least it was like the 1700s or something. I could be very wrong with that date, but it was much later than I initially expected. So having those types of discrepancies where it's like, oh, I am making my own rules, but I do want to keep some sense of reality. Sometimes I succeeded. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? This is my world. I'm going to do what I want.
Yes. I can understand that, because I've encountered that too, again, writing in my own fantasy world, and occasionally introducing like new different kinds of magic or things that might verge a little bit on steampunk, which is like really fun to explore. But then you do kind of have the question of, okay, why do they have this but not that? Like why do they have, a steam-powered engine, but they don't have like, they're not interested in creating plastic, or, like whatever has been the natural progression in our world of the technology. The fun part for me is then getting to be like, well, this is a world that just operates on different principles and has different driving forces, and they tend to be a little bit less, a little less capitalistic, but maybe that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, I have come across things where I feel silly afterwards of using like, for example, there is a scene, Duchess Jacqueline, she loves sweets. She's always eating, and she is eating chocolate, she's eating pastries and what have you. And in one book, I was tired of saying the word pastry. And so in my mind, I was like, what other sweet breaded treat could I say instead of pastry? And so I started using Danish, and I didn't realize at the time that like Danishes are actually named after like Daneland, like that's where they come, like that's where the whole origin
you never think
of
about it.
And I was like, well, why would they have something named a Danish in a place where Daneland never existed? And so I never used the word again, but there is one book where like the word Danish pops up, and readers are going to be like, what the heck is this doing in here? And that was because Sarah Burr did not know any better. And which can happen sometimes.
Yeah. That's what makes it fun. Little Easter eggs, right?
Exactly. I have a lot of them, a lot of Easter eggs.
Well, and I know we're running just a little long, but I have 2 questions that I want to finish up with.
Yes.
And the first one is, if you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, man. The advice that I would give to myself is a lot longer than the time we have left. I would say think about your voice as an author and what you want to convey with that voice. Because in the beginning, I got into writing simply because I wanted to try it. I love writing, and I loved creating stories, and I wanted to be published. And if I had maybe thought a little bit more strategically of, setting up a pen name or figuring out like, who am I as an author? Like, what kind of story do I want to tell? If I want to tell multiple different stories, like, how are you going to approach that? Because marketing has become such a huge part of our lives as authors. Yeah. I never expected there to be as much marketing as we're expected to do, not only by our publishers, but if you're in the indie space, like you're it. And so I would just encourage myself to slow down, think about what you want to say to your audience, what you want to say to your readers, and be true to that mission. Go in with a purpose and focus on that purpose. Because otherwise you can kind of confuse people with your messaging, I think. And if I had to do it all over again, I would definitely have written the Court of Mystery series with a pen name, and done my modern cozies on like under their own name as well, because it's tricky to like do them all at the same time, because they are different. But I do like that we have found that they definitely have that like found family aspect that unites them all. Yeah. And they're all mysteries. So that's it.
Thematically they're very linked. But yeah, it's so true, because people tell you that you are your brand, especially as an author, and it's very true. And I think some authors hear that and they get discouraged, or they feel like it comes across as somehow like icky or performative, but there's a lot of freedom in it too. Because if you get clear on yourself and your message, like that's helpful not just in your career, but just for you as a person to know this is important to me.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people hear it and they think, well, like, I'm not in it for the money, or I'm not in it for the sales. I'm in it to just tell my story and to be creative. And I think that's why a lot of us get it. We get in to tell our stories. But if we want our stories to make an impact or to make a difference or to affect somebody the way that they've affected us, like, we need to be able to message that to our audience. So yeah, being able to figure out who you are and to find a way to share that with readers, I think is definitely something that is worth considering, especially early on in your journey.
Love it. All right, final question. What is a win that you have had in the past week?
Ooh, a win in the past week.
Something you're proud of, something good that's happened.
It's a little bit more than a week ago, but I did finish I have a couple of things, because it all leads up to the big win. I finished my manuscript about a week and a half ago, sent it to my editor, so that's kind of off my plate. Nice. I can kind of take a deep breath, focus. And so that also means that I send it to my beta readers. And with this particular book, this is my third book blogger mystery. It's been a long time since I've actually written about Winnie and her friends. I was really, really nervous about how I did, because I didn't feel that it was up to snuff. I don't know why I feel that way. I'm very critical of myself, so I imagine that has something to do with it. And so I just didn't have a great feeling sending this book off. And I've had that before, but with this one, it felt particularly like, oh God. But I received a message from one of my beta readers who's also a cozy mystery author. And she's like, Sarah, I don't know why you think that this book is 5 stars. Like she loved it. She's like, I read it in 3 days. I couldn't wait to get back to it each time. It was so good. Like, please, please keep writing these because the characters are wonderful. And I was just like, I almost cried because I was so relieved. Because for so long, it's just been me telling myself, wow, this book is not going well. But to have other people say, like, this was great, I wouldn't change anything, like, all of this stuff, I was like, oh, thank goodness. So that was my big win, is getting that feedback from a reader / author who knows the genre, to know, like, what readers expect and want from their books. So that was a big relief. Big win.
And perfect. Because I feel like it wraps back around to this idea of found family and people who have your back and can tell you that even if you don't think you did a good job, you really did.
Yes, and that is another thing that I would tell my younger self, is to, as introverted as I am, find your community of writers. It took me a long time to get up the courage to form these friendships with people, but I'm so glad that I did, because having somebody not only to celebrate your wins, but to commiserate your losses is a huge thing for surviving this industry, and still keeping the fire alive of how much you love writing without being kind of your spark being snuffed out by everything that gets thrown at us.
Absolutely. And that's an amazing note to end on. So I will have your link and everything in the bio so that people can go find you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. And I love that I got to talk about things that I normally don't get to talk about in the cozy sphere, because of the fantasy element, the whimsical element that we got to connect with. So thank you, Elle, for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you listeners out there who have joined us. I will talk to you next time. Cozy Alchemy is brought to you by Authors on the Air, and our theme music is by Cyberwave Orchestra. For everything else, blame Elle. You can find her online at ellehartford.com.